Hello, I'm Aily Nash. I'm one of the programmers of the current section of the New York Film Festival. You are here with Vincent Meessen for the conversation around his film, Just a Movement. And welcome, Vincent.
Thank you.
It's great to be in conversation with you around this film. I really enjoyed rewatching it again just in the last couple of days since it had been a while. And yeah, there's so much in it. So I'm very excited to dig into it with you. I thought we could begin by kind of touching on the various kind of parallel threads, layers, narratives that you kind of so seamlessly weave together in this film. And maybe to begin, the context that you set with the students and Nanterre as kind of the starting point of the film, which of course is where Omar Diop studied. But maybe you could speak about that, and then we could move into some of the other kind of layers and aspects.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's true. It's interesting, maybe because it's really the start of the film takes place in Nanterre, so in the outskirts of Paris, where actually the May '68 uprising started originally. When I came back from the shooting from Dakar in 2019 and was nearly started to edit, I was just informed that by coincidence there was a huge exhibition taking place in Théâtre des Amandiers in Nanterre. And it was an exhibition by Jean-Luc Godard that was prepared by him and his colleagues, Nicole Brenet and some other assistants, where he would show his last film, but also a kind of retrospective of the works that he did also with his partner, Marie Mieville. And so it was conceptually, it was really strong because the whole theater and its coulisses and every part of the theater would be used to show films. So for us it was and for me it was like an invitation to start the film there. So I decided that we should go there and shoot inside, which we could do, and that's why the film start there. And it's like a present, you know. You never can expect something like that, and for me it was a sort of yeah, it was really a loop, you know, like the film was even taking more meaning by starting over there. So that's the explanation for this sequence in the beginning. And maybe I can elaborate more on the issue of Nanterre, and because it comes back also in the film. There's a moment in the film where we see students, an archive from young students from Nanterre who are actually joking about the way they are treated in the press from that period.
Yeah, and from there we follow this character who's recurring throughout the film, who we see kind of shooting his own film on Super 8, and then we see his footage. And so can you talk about that as another kind of layer?
Well, let's say it's probably like the third layer of the film, so we can start with the third layer. But it's true that it begins with this character who is a filmmaker and an historian, who's basically Omar Gay, my assistant. I don't like to say my assistant, but he was working on the film and helping me to get it done actually, and giving me tips and started more as a fixer actually in the beginning, and then but a very nice person and smart guy, and we became friends. And I wanted him to really take a sort of a space in this film, not only because it's a kind of transfer of my role, But it's also a sort of projection that I do, of course, and we can elaborate more on that and about this issue of course, a very Senegalese history, thematic and dramatic story also being brought and shot by a Belgian filmmaker, but only shot in Dakar, where all the crew is also from Dakar, and nearly all the crew, because some of my crew was of course there, like the people I used to work with. But us is really like also a sort of looking for some kind of dialogue on a very elaborated way, and in the same time also working very organically over there. So Rouma is actually possibly shooting a third film, because in my film there are two films. Let's say that this film that I'm trying to shoot about trying to document and the life of Omar Blondin Diop, who he was and what kind of struggle he was engaged with, what kind of ideas and what kind of project for the people around him. So we have a sort of we have a sort of very polyphonic portrait or heterogeneous portrait of a character who died in the 70s and who comes back, let's say, through the narrative and through the testimonies of those witnesses. And those witnesses are mostly like his parents, brothers, very close friends. And I really wanted that this portrait would be really the fruit of this relationship with the people very close to him. So that's one thing. That was also the decision to shoot it entirely in Dakar and not try to find some former friend.
Right.
I really wanted to go back there for this reason, and I think that Rouma is yeah, maybe I should speak about the second film, of course, before going back to this third element. So let's say for me, the first part of the film is this documentary take on the life of Omar, and then there Omar, having played his own role in a famous film by Jean-Luc Godard called La Chinoise in '67, which is a film which is actually making Maoist and Maoism a little bit ridicule, and having a very critical take on these students, you know, who are calling for revolution and are ready to use violence to have their idea put on the table. Which is also interesting when we can speak about Godard's also move towards Maoism right after that. So it's a complex story. But let's say that Omar played his own role. As if people have seen the film, of course, they understand very well what I'm saying. If people haven't seen the film, I just want to highlight this fact that Omar is actually the only Maoist that is playing his own role in the film, but he's the only student and the only real militant. So in some way, for me, it was like a documentary character that had been hijacked by Godard in fiction. And although it's a kind of anticipation on what's going to happen in some way, and that's why the film has been seen as a very important film afterwards, not only for those reasons, but also because of the construction of the cinema language, and we will speak about that probably later on. So Omar playing his own role in this deconstructionist kind of cinema from Godard makes it possible for me to enter in a sort of dialogue with Godard cinema and with its methodology. So that's what I call the second film, let's say the meta cinema dimension of the film. And there is this third film, which is not very clear. And I for me, it's about the cinema which is for tomorrow, or which is a cinema I might expect also from my colleagues, my African colleagues, my Senegalese colleagues, like Roma, because I'm completely sure that they will make those films in the coming years. And Roma is busy working on new projects, so it's a sort of dialogue with him also, and giving him the space that I think he has taken in the process of making this film. So in some way, for me, it was a way to make it visible, and also to trigger the attention of the viewer, because of course we try to know what he's doing and what kind of film he's doing while we are into this process of documenting Omar's life and of trying to cope with what could be the potentiality of Godard cinema today. Not that he has stopped making films, of course, but I speak about that cinema and the radicality that was there, and how we can try to use it and think about it while working. That's part of the issue.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear you speak a little bit more specifically around formally how you weave between all of these three films, as you say. And I'm curious if for you the third film is these moments where we're seeing an audience in Senegal watching a screen, and we kind of fluidly move between the setting of this kind of outdoor cinema and then into this kind of like into the screen where there are these moments where people are practicing martial arts. There's this lecture given on Godard in Chinese. Is this the third film that you're speaking of?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I think that's more the second, like the dialogue with Godard's film and cinema.
Okay.
It's not such a thing as three films in one. I think it's all.
They're all blended, of course.
They're all blended, and it's a way also for you to try to imagine. I think. Possibly something else even. I mean, when I speak about this film to come is a sort of projection of maybe also the next film I might be able to do, although it might be different. What I wanted to say is that the Chinese dimension of this film is really an important element, because what I try to do is to actualize not only a character, Omar, to give him like his full dimension, not to reduce it and to hijack him as it was in the past. So to try to give him back his own complexity and really to bring something in terms of transmission for the young generation in Senegal. So I think it was really needed to do something. On the other hand, there is this Chinese projection that was in 65 or 66 or 67 at that time, where there was a fascination for the Cultural Revolution over there in most of the, or in part of the elite in France and the young students. What I try to do is to look at how it has shifted this and how it's being actualized in Senegal. So we have this kind of transculture that is vivid, where people have been educated in China and they come back in the country, and they, in some way, they can be fluent, but they can also practice martial art. They can practice maybe, they can be a doctor in Chinese medicine. So all these things are operating at a level that is really astonishing, and it's creating some kind of new hybrids that you couldn't expect. So the thing is that when I entered the Confucius Institute in Dakar, I was like seeing a scene from a Godard film. and it was just about inviting the people and just putting them in and framing this. So a lot of it is really like people met on the spot while looking for those people and trying to give a sense of what is happening over there. So there is in some way an actualization of Godard's film in another context, in another period. And my idea about that is not so much even, let's say, it goes beyond that, all what we've been saying up to now. I think that the film is really about three main issues. I think there's an issue of history, an issue of memory, and an issue of justice. I think these are the three elements, the three core elements of this film. And my relationship to history is not linear. And I think cinema is really the tool that is designed to where you really can approach history as a sort of spiral, you know. You cannot write that history without using people's memory, because it's confronting, and it's actually the material with which you can rewrite history, and you can sensibilize history, like really try to make it something very different than written science. Even of course, it's the whole debate about the writing of history is also a debate from the 70s, but it remains very important to try to meditate on that while practicing. I think so. The film is also about really dealing with this issue while doing, you know, not as something that has been really prepared, but some really like dealing on the spot with those issues with the people you met on the spot. So for being able to do that, you need to reflect, of course, on the methodology, and Godard's methodology offers, at least the one that he was using in La Chinoise, offers the kind of montage film that permits these kind of jumps and cuts and create a sort of big complexity in terms of cinematic language, but that also offers a way to reconnect with Omar's relationship to cinema, which we can a little bit speak about also in a very interesting way, because he was not only connected to Godard, but he was also connected to other filmmakers.
Right. Yeah, let's speak a bit more about that. It's mentioned in the film that he was also involved in another kind of experimental avant-garde film, and had a lot of relationships to artists and kind of the kind of aesthetics as well. So yeah, would you say more about that?
Well, in some way, it's not present in the film, but I think it's worth mentioning that Omar was one of his best friends was Simon Hartog, who was the founder of the London Film Cooperative, one of the founder. So, and he played in a very small film, which is not so great, let's say, but interesting to see, which is called Soul in a White Room, which is a small experimental film from these London guys, that were also, for some of them, into this kind of structuralist film. But Simon Hartog was also one of the founder of Channel 4 and a head of documentaries at the BBC for a period. So he was someone who was also very engaged in third cinema, dealing and distributing it in the UK. So in some way, you could say that Omar is connected to Nouvelle Vague and through Godard, but also to the London Film Corp, which is completely another story. But he also wrote an essay on Warhol in '69 about Chelsea Girls, which is really a fantastic essay. So in some way, you could also see him as someone who was also in some way connected to what was happening in the States. And he was also he's also mentioned in a film by Medondo, which is typically like third cinema from France, or like Afro-French third cinema, probably one of the most famous and interesting filmmakers from that period. Although he had to struggle all his life to make his films, of course. But Medondo is also mentioning Omar in one of his films, so they might have even have met and known each other in Paris at that time. So I think Omar was someone who was really connected to a lot of people in Paris, artists, thinkers, and when he died, it was really also a sort of earthquake in Paris, because he was so connected that people reacted in the press, and like in the biggest dailies, they were like papers. So I think it's a very interesting character for all these reasons, but also because as a film tried to show, it's something that is not closed, and that's why I made the film. I made the film because the family was asking for the reopening of the court case. At least on the reopening of the case about the condition of his death in a prison in Dakar. And I thought it's really something that, how can you imagine that more than 40 years after, a family is still asking for something like that? So it's clear that there is something that is really unresolved in Dakar about that, and it has to do also with the heritage of the political heritage of that period. So for me, there was also, and just to finish with this, also is another element that was also a motivation for me, because you mentioned the Super 8 when we started to discuss, and there's a biographic dimension to it. Is my family, my parents were living there at that time, with two of my elder brother, and the image that we see, like the Super 8 image that are in the film, I actually shot by my grandfather, who was on a visit over there. So when Huma, my assistant, is filming, and we see him like documenting part of the actions during a demonstration. Also, there's a sequence about one of Omar's best friend, who was a major artist, major African artist, Issa Samb. For me, it's a way also to channel this kind of troubled relationship with history. And if you consider that history is not closed but open, and that you can reactivate something in the present, then there are a lot of things that can be reopened thanks to cinema.
Maybe this is a good moment to ask you to speak about the conversation that occurs on the train, which is then kind of taken from the conversation on the train from La Chinoise. But yeah, I wondered if you could. I feel like much of the film occurs in kind of conversational form, and I feel like this scene in particular is quite striking. So will you talk a bit about that?
So there are only two sequences that are taken back from La Chinoise or reactivated, let's say. The one of Omar, who is actually lecturing to the other students and trying to give some clues about the situation of the left wing in Europe, which is interesting, of course, because Godard wants a black guy to teach the white bourgeois students about what's happening in the left. So this scene is, as you mentioned, reactivated by a lesson in Mandarin, in Chinese, about Godard's film, actually, and it's a translation from a text that Rancière wrote about, which is a fantastic reading of Godard La Chinoise, also because Rancière has been close to also Maoist and to Althusser at that time. So that's why he's so knowledgeable about that history and that particular film, which was very much discussed in those circles back then. It's a text that he wrote much later, so he channels a lot of things into that text. So on one hand, we have this scene which is completely adapted in terms of content, like this last scene, which is also one of the closing scene in La Chinoise. There's another chapter, let's say, right after that scene in this film, and for me, it's also like really coming to the end. And this scene is, let's say, is reappropriated also, where we have the same kind of dialogue that is set between an intellectual and a militant. Mm-hmm. The militant is this rapper and activist from a very important movement in Senegal called Y'en a marre, so we're fed up, which has been key in opposing the former president in like 10 years ago, and who wanted to put his son as a president. So they were like really a very important movement in this kind of peaceful revolution that took place 10 years ago. And they're still very active on many levels in terms of urban development, in terms of the place of youth in the city, into culture, of course, because they're rappers. So let's say these guys are still very, very active. And we have Malal, this rapper and activist, who is actually challenging Felwinsa, one of the most well-known African intellectual, Senegalese, from the country, who just started to teach in the US, but who has been really like working in Senegal for many, many years before, and who became also a very influent intellectual by his essay, and he's also writing some novels, and he's also a musician and an economist, but he was also very important the last years in the debates in Europe, because he was the co-author with Bénédicte Savoy, a French historian, on a report that they wrote that was commissioned by the French president Macron about the restitution of colonial artifacts. So they made this report that took them like a few months to complete, or I think a study that took 1 year, and that had like tremendous effect worldwide, because all the ethnographic and anthropological museum are concerned, and most of the museum, I mean, British or the Louvre or the Met, or because it's really connected with the question of restitution and how some objects have been acquired or stolen, so they try to find their way and offer some tracks to rethink this on a world level, but it was commissioned for France, so it's basically this issue. And there is this museum opening in Dakar that we see in the film that is offered by the Chinese to the Senegalese people. So I really thought that the two of them talking together, they don't know each other before I don't think they had ever met before. They are brought together and they discuss this issue, which is the need of infrastructure in Senegal in order to kind of recapture your own story, and how it is important for a whole generation to be able to mirror themselves and to learn about the many different cultures from Senegal. So, but then there is, of course, there's this discussion that speaks about different issue, because there's also the issue of militancy that is starting there, and the relationship to people in power, how they try to operate with militant, and and try to recapture also the power of the people. So this discussion is in itself is a very rich element in the film, and I think it helps the viewer to understand more where I want to arrive, or what I want to propose also as a sort of dialogical format, because this film is really like a sort of embrace or a sort of dance with Godard, but for what? I mean, it's not just a sort of very free take, you know, that would be just a game about reproducing or just trying a methodology for free. Is really like trying to bring us at some point as viewers, but also as citizens. And I think this issue of justice and memory is also something that is mostly channeled or orchestrated by museum. So seeing a film is also, you know, a very participative act, and that's why I really think that the viewer needs to not only find his space, but to be offered the space to navigate this on his own, and be really active.
I think that's yeah, go ahead.
No, so it's really about I think this relationship between being a spectator and being an actor, you know, where everybody plays his own role in the film, and you are in the audience watching people watching this film, which is being shot. So this whole motto of Godard saying, okay, La Chinoise is a film in the making, un film en train de se faire. What does it mean? I think it's really like trying to capitalize on what does it mean to be, as a cinematographer, active in the present. And that's really something that I hope is visible in this film. So in some way, how you can be really going with the flow and with the people, because this demonstration is a demonstration that takes place when I'm there. It happens. So how can you be, you know, open to what's happening in the present, while really being aware that in this present there are many moments where you can find resonance from the past. And in some way, I think there's a very, at least for me, there was a sort of consciousness of thinking about Walter Benjamin's take on history, and how, you know, you always rewrite it from the present, and there are some moments in your daily life where you can really reopen the door and reconnect with spirits and people and things that have been there, and that you still consider as being operative for you and operative in an environment. And in this ways, doing this film is a way to try to make this visible, but also to make it understandable for me and for people around working with us on the spot over there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your process and thoughts with us. It's very interesting to hear the way that all of these ideas have come together. And yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you also for these questions, because it's a dialogue. Huh? If you if you have another question, you go elsewhere. And that's what I like also in this format.